Hi, I'm Malik, and I'm gonna tell you about how my college experience has been affected by all the psychological concepts that were involved in part 2 of Psych 101. More specifically, I'll discuss the demands that going to college asks from each of those psychological concepts and my reluctance to kind of change my brain in order to perform well in this academic environment. I'm going to step through the 6 concepts that we learned about, being consciousness, memory, cognition, intelligence / individual differences, behavioral psychology, and finally industrial / organizational psychology. Let's begin. So, the first area being consciousness, which is our moment to moment awareness, plays a pretty big part in my college experience, and that is because it decides how well I can focus. So, when I'm in a lecture that I don't find interesting, there's this part of me that just refuses to pay attention. And it was mentioned in psychology lecture, which I do find interesting, that half of the time our minds are just wandering. I think if that's true, my half of the time must be spent mostly in either a boring lecture or doing boring homework. I think that's because our consciousnesses, conscii, or whatever, naturally stick to whatever thoughts that we find important. And the reason why I believe that is because I don't just find all lectures boring, as I said before. I do like psychology lecture, and I do find paying attention in my music classes to be very rewarding. It's just that for the other classes, I don't think that pretending to care about the subjects being presented would help me focus. So instead of trying to pretend, what I could do is just improve my focus overall. I could do so by, as was mentioned in lecture, not multitasking when I'm doing homework, because that's not an effective way to accomplish anything at all. And I could try meditating, although the effectiveness of meditating is unproven. Moving on to our second psychological concept, being memory. So, memory is a really big factor when it comes to the whole academic performance side of my college experience, because really all we're doing in college is remembering stuff, because we remember facts or we remember how to do things, like how to solve certain problems. Even in my math classes, I knew I wasn't in trouble on a quiz if I was faced with a problem I'd never seen before. I was in trouble when I got to a problem that I didn't remember how to do. So I think that the problem I have and that most people have when it comes to memory in college is that they're not invested enough to encode the information coming into their short-term memory into their long-term memory. And from the previous section, I think this relates to not paying attention, because you can go to a lecture and stare at the board and listen to the professor, and mentally speaking, you're 100% present, but you're still not committing the lesson being taught to your memory. You're not learning, really. You're just kind of sitting there. So, as we learn about lecture, you can use mnemonic devices to remember information by applying some semantic meaning to it. You can't just let the factoids float on into your head without really doing anything to them. You gotta process them on a deep level. You need to use deep processing. Another concept I would like to work on is distributed studying, because I've got a habit of learning something in a lecture and then not really thinking about it until a couple days before a test. Then I'll refresh and I'll study up and get to the test and forget about the information. So what I should do is look over material frequently to the point where it just becomes like second-hand knowledge, and I'm very comfortable with the concepts being posed. I'll bet that my reluctance to do that kind of studying stems from the fact that a lot of what I'm learning, maybe not a lot, a good chunk of what I'm learning is stuff that I don't even think is worth investing the energy to internalize into my long-term memory storage, because I don't care about it on a level. And I'm talking about like my math classes. They're the primary offenders here. Like, those formulas, I don't care. So, yeah, just kind of, it's the idea that I'll take the information in lecture and it's kind of like hold it a foot away from me until a test, and I'll use it and then I'll toss it because I don't really care about it. So ideally I would be in classes where I value what's being taught as knowledge rather than just a couple of factoids that I'll store up until a test. On to the third section, which is cognition. This one will be pretty dry. So, cognition is most useful in my math-oriented classes. I've already expressed some of my negative opinions on those classes. So, this semester, I've got a class called Discrete Structures. That's all based on deductive reasoning and proofs, which, as we learned, are central to deductive reasoning. So, my ability to go from general knowledge down to specific truths is being put to the test. And I think we weren't really expected to do that before post-secondary education, post-secondary education. We weren't expected to do so much of our own reasoning on academic level and otherwise. On the sideline, one psychological aspect of cognition that sort of nags at me is the hindsight bias. That's due to the test-based structure of our education. So whenever I get back a test, it's gotten to the point where, like, checking what I got wrong is more frustrating than illuminating. So sometimes I just don't even check what I got wrong, especially if it's a topic that I do not find I care about remembering for an extended period of time. The next section, which I believe is the fourth section, is intelligence and individual differences. And this is a big one, because this is the one that peeves me off. So, college is centered around learning, but I feel that we're giving intelligence a bit too much praise. Being in an academic environment makes it awkward to address how IQ and stuff has a genetic basis, as we learned from the twin studies, because it implies that there's this exclusivity to post-secondary education that has a basis in something that we as individuals straight up can't change about ourselves. And that's kind of messed up, because post-secondary education is viewed as a means to a successful adult life. So stripping us of the idea of an equal playing field is a bit problematic. When you admit that there's more to doing well in college than just working hard, it's not just disheartening for those that are struggling to succeed in an academic environment, it's also taking something away from the successes of those that are thriving in school. That's why I get a little bit riled up when people glorify intelligence, take pride in their status as an intelligent individual, because I think that's kind of a cheap pride. I got a new pet peeve, like, really fast when I came to the U, and it was of how people act like intelligence in and of itself is an accomplishment that you can flaunt around. I think you should use your smarts to do something you're proud of, rather than just parade around your big brain. Like, universities are using knowledge to help the world, so it's kind of strange when they get caught up in the pomp and show everybody how exclusive they are, rather than show everybody the practical accomplishments that they've achieved. A part of me is like the triarchic model of intelligence is cool and valuing multiple kinds of intelligence, but a bigger part of me is like there's not a point in doing that once you go so far, because it goes to show that we value this construct of intelligence to such a degree that we really blur the definition of what intelligence even is in the first place. So I think we just really shouldn't value it that much. And instead we should focus on our actual accomplishments and attaining our goals rather than focusing on our ability to theoretically do such things. The next part is behavioral psychology. So this is another big spot where college differs from education that came before it, because there is a decrease in the amount of operant conditioning that is performed. This decrease is very super obvious when we take it to the extreme and compare elementary school to college, because reinforcement and punishment decline as we age. The amount of reinforcement and punishment that's administered to us. When I was in elementary, we would get stars for behaving well in class, and we get snacks for even just showing up. And I think the snacks can't be overstated. The food can't be overstated, because they fed us all the way through high school. And that's like one of the best things that you can do for somebody. But we can't forget the punishments. Like, teachers were not afraid to embarrass you in front of the whole class. And you could get sent to the principal's office, who is the head honcho. You could even get called home. So, aside from being held accountable on the behavioral side of things, there is also the academic accountability. Our teachers really got to know us, so at a point you begin to feel responsibility towards them, especially since they're the ones grading your assignments. And there was stuff like conferences and transparency between your grades and your parents. All that stuff I mentioned is gone in college, and it can kind of give the feeling like you're the only one that's working to maintain your academic performance. At least that's how I feel. And I don't think it's a problem because I can't handle the responsibility. I think it's just unmotivating and way less fun when it feels like you're the only one that cares about your academic journey. That's why I prefer the smaller classes where you could build a relationship with your professor, and why sometimes I get disruptive in larger lectures, because it's just nice to establish a presence in a class. It's very rewarding. Another problem I find here in college is that our schedules of reinforcement are super boring. There are zero surprises here. That's led to one of my favorite academic moments so far in college being in my local environmental solutions class last semester, which was a very fun class, full of field trips. We had this class where we were giving presentations. So it was a switch up. It was near the beginning of November. I expected the atmosphere to be far less interesting than usual. But our professor surprised us and brought cookies, which was amazing. So that really turned the whole activity on its head, and it was really chill. And I just don't think that there are enough surprises or enough. It's not dynamic like that enough in college because we're too busy acting professional and sticking strictly to business. Psychology discussion actually does a good job of mixing things up, but my more math-oriented teachers, they should really think about spicing things up. So, our industrial and organizational section, the final one. A lot of people see college as the bridge to their career, and this was the unit that really emphasized it's not just about teaching us facts about the field we're interested in. We're being shaped into workers. So, in Professor Kunzel's lecture, he showed us that the traits in Ocean, except for neuroticism, which was reversed into emotional stability, correlated with effective leadership. And I've already established that the idea our success is dependent on traits that we're kind of born with is not very cool. There was also this graph which shows how practice, it doesn't mean as much as we act like it does, which is kind of sad because it also reinforces the whole deterministic vibe that some of the intelligence section was suggesting. So in conclusion, there are a lot of frustrating aspects in college that feel like they're encouraging me to model myself after the ideal student. But that's kind of difficult when I'm not invested in the material that's being taught, and when the ideal student sounds kind of lame. I don't want to bother focusing on committing to memory all the lessons that don't feel meaningful or important to me. I could choose to embody some of the traits that we prop up with this idea of an intelligent, conscientious, agreeable student, but I think the celebration of those traits in and of themselves is kind of pointless when they aren't being used to back up actual achievements or being used for something important. And I don't think that pretending to be interested in a subject is something worthy of channeling those kinds of traits. I also find celebrating those traits gross when I consider their genetic bases. So I have a lot of reasons to not want to act like the ideal student. I think that my college experience would be improved if more of my classes made an effort to be engaging. Once again, I think Psych 101 is doing a good job at this. And I believe if the U would just drop their whole prestigious atmosphere that comes with hyping up the intelligence and the grit of the ideal academic, and just focus on acquiring knowledge and presenting material in an engaging manner, I would feel much more proud to attend the school.